With Green Bay Packers OTAs and mandatory minicamp officially in the books for the 2025 offseason, I wanted to take some time today to go over my next iteration of the Green Bay Packers 53-man roster prediction. I did one right after the draft, and of course, as offseason activities progress, such as OTAs and minicamp, we start to get a better take on what this 53-man roster is shaping out to be. Now, of course, we have about 5 to 6 weeks until training camp, and training camp is the real period where this 53-man roster will take shape. But that doesn't mean we didn't learn a few things from OTAs and minicamp. I mean, we even had a player cross-trained at another position that I think will make the roster on. So there are a good amount of changes from my 1.0 version to this version post OTAs and minicamp. So let's dive into it. Let's try to predict the Green Bay Packers 53-man roster for 2025. Guys, do me a favor and go down and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. You'll stay in the loop with everything Green Bay Packers this offseason. Sure, we have a little bit of a dry spell between now and training camp, but that doesn't mean there won't be plenty of content here on this channel, especially if any news drops or salary cap updates or contract updates. You'll find it here all on this channel. And then, of course, when training camp does come around, you'll have highlights and recaps from every single day of practice right here on this channel. All right, so without further ado, let's dive right down into it. First, want to go over the player key or the color key for certain players on this roster when I show them up on the screen. So if the player is just in black, that means they make the 53-man roster. If they're in blue, that means I think they'll be a practice squad guy on this roster. And if they're in red, I think they're going to be outright cut. Some other color keys to note: rookies are in green, but they also have an R next to the name, so pretty easy to spot there. Then we also have undrafted free agents that I think may make the roster. I do have one making the roster. They will be in purple. And then also, if a player is starting the year on the PUP, which I only have one of them so far because we only really have one candidate as of right now, that's obviously Christian Watson, they will be in orange. All right, so let's start with the quarterback position. There is a change here for me. The last time we did the roster prediction, it was a couple days before they signed Tanner Elgersma, and I talked about Elgersma in that video. Basically, hey, if he does get signed, that he could compete for that third quarterback spot on the practice squad. And through OTAs and minicamp, and again, it's non-padded practice, so yeah, we learned some things, but the real competition is definitely going to start training camp, preseason for this third quarterback spot. But as of right now, based on what we saw, I think Tanner Elgersma has the leg up on Sean Clifford right now for that third quarterback spot. I think he has a higher ceiling. I think he has more potential. We saw on the final day of minicamp, I think, throw 3 straight touchdowns to Cornelius Johnson in the red zone 7v7s. And just right now, I feel like he has a better chance to be the practice squad quarterback for the Packers. Now, quarterback 1 and 2 won't change. Jordan Love, Malik Willis, and they will roster only 2 unless for some reason the Packers get a offer that they cannot turn down from Malik Willis, which I don't see happening. If it were to happen, it would have already happened. So Malik Willis most definitely remaining on this roster as a quarterback number 2 for at least one more year. I believe it's actually the last year of his contract as well. And then we'll see what happens next offseason. But quarterback, pretty straightforward. Love, Willis, Elgersma on the practice squad, and an outright cut for Sean Clifford. Moving over to running back, I have changed nothing for running back, and I feel like I probably won't change it all of the offseason. Now, I was kind of pondering keeping only 3, but I just can't cut one of these running backs, in my opinion. You know, Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd, these 2 are roster locks. Now, if Marshawn Lloyd suffers an injury yet again and starts on the PP, something of that could happen. But I'm not going to bet on that. He did have a rough rookie season in terms of injuries, but that doesn't mean that's going to be his entire career. And I'm really hoping for a healthy year for Marshawn Lloyd. Now, Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks, a lot of people say pick one of them. I think you need both on this roster. I think they give you 2 different things. Emmanuel Wilson can come right in and can take a ton of handoffs for your football team, get the first down on 3rd and 1, whereas Chris Brooks is probably the best pass protecting running back on this team, can play some H-back. You know, you can really use him in a multitude of different ways, and I think Chris Brooks has a lot of value, and I believe Matt LaFleur likes him a lot. So I couldn't cut either of these guys. So I still have the Packers keeping 4 running backs, practice squatting Amar Johnson, and outright cutting Jalen White. Moving over to tight end, and one of the reasons why I keep 4 running backs in Chris Brooks is because I'm only keeping 3 tight ends so far on this 53-man roster. This remains exactly the same, except for I dropped Messiah Swinton from the practice squad because I wanted some other players on the practice squad in this iteration. But in terms of the players making the roster, this remains the same. Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, and Ben Sims are the 3 tight ends to make the roster in this prediction. And Ben Sims has gotten snaps over John Fitzpatrick, so I'm comfortable putting him over Fitzpatrick, but Fitzpatrick being the practice squad guy and likely seeing some call-ups on game day if the Packers want more tight ends during that game. That could definitely happen. But the top 3, it's almost definitely going to be Kraft, Musgrave, and Sims. Fitzpatrick on the practice squad, and I have them outright cutting Swinton and Lumpkin, but we could also see Swinton on the practice squad. Just for this iteration, I couldn't really fit him on there. Moving to wide receiver, this is where we also see a pretty big change. Now, last roster prediction, I was pretty adamant about the fact that Mecole Hardman has to earn a spot on this roster, and he has to have a really good offseason to make this roster. Well, he has so far. Mecole Hardman had a great OTA and an even better minicamp, scoring the final touchdown in minicamp day 1, scoring the final touchdown in minicamp day 2, which was a 73-yard bomb from Jordan Love over cornerback Gregory Jr. And he's also been taking reps at kick return, punt return. So he's offering a lot of value right now. Plus, with the change of Bo Melton, not necessarily a change, a cross training of Bo Melton, this also makes wide receiver a little bit easier to project. So I have the same first 5 as everyone should. These first 5 are roster locks outside of a Romeo Doubs random trade, which I don't foresee happening. We have Doubs, Reed, Wicks, and then rookies Matthew Golden and Savion Williams. And I have my 6th receiver as Mecole Hardman. Now, last roster prediction, I only had 5 receivers, and that still could be the case. They just roll with these top 5, and that's it. But I think Mecole Hardman does offer a lot on special teams. Now, I still think Keyshawn Nixon's going to be our kick returner. I think that was a little bit overblown after he said he doesn't want to return kicks anymore after the Eagles game, and that was the case. Earlier this offseason, he basically said, I'm open to doing whatever is best for the team, and with the rule change, he might get some more opportunities to actually return the kicks. But having a secondary guy there in case Nixon needs a breather is great to have, and Mecole Hardman is that, and he could definitely become our starting punt returner. And then we'd stop putting Jaden Reed back there, which I'm all about. So I do have Mecole Hardman in this iteration making the roster. Christian Watson opening the year on the PUP, as everyone expects. And then I have the 2 practice squad receivers as Malik Heath and Cornelius Johnson. So far, one of the back end receivers that have made the most, buzz has been Cornelius Johnson. He's had a great minicamp, so I have him making the practice squad with Malik Heath and outright cutting Sam Brown Jr. and Julian Hicks. Now, I left Bo Melton off the wide receiver list because, spoiler, I have him making the roster as a cornerback, which we'll dive into when we get to cornerback, so that's why he's left off at wide receiver. But, of course, if he's on the roster and they need him to take reps at receiver, they 100% can do that, but I have him off the roster as a receiver, rather making it as a cornerback. Moving into the offensive line, I have it separated from tackle, guard, and center. There's a couple changes here in terms of positioning. I do have Anthony Belton as a tackle now because that's the only spot he's taken reps at, left tackle and right tackle, whereas I thought he'd at least see some reps at guard so far. That has not happened. Maybe it will during training camp, but because he hasn't taken any reps at guard, I'm listing him as a tackle, and I have the Packers keeping 4 tackles, and I'm dropping Kadeem Telfort to the practice squad, whereas on the last iteration, I had him making it, and overall, I had 10 linemen making it, where now I have 9, which the Packers kind of flip-flop from that year to year, whether it's 9 offensive linemen or 10, but it's Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker, Jordan Morgan, and Anthony Belton. Jordan Morgan's been taking reps at left tackle number 1, so, I think they view him as a tackle. He could win that job over Rasheed Walker. And the Packers have a very, very solid top 4 tackles. One of the strongest tackle groups in the NFL, in my opinion, with Tom, Walker, Morgan, and Belton. And I have them practice squatting Kadeem Telfort and Travis Glover and outright cutting Brant Banks. Moving over to guard, I have them only keeping 3. Last iteration, I had them keeping 4, and it did include John Williams. But this time I'm swapping out John Williams for Donovan Jennings. And of course, like I said, moved Anthony Belton over to tackle. Donovan Jennings saw first team reps in the absence of Aaron Banks at left guard, and that shows that the Packers view him as a 53-man roster player. I think Donovan Jennings had a lot of hype last offseason as an undrafted free agent, a priority undrafted free agent, but of course really couldn't stay healthy and kind of lost that hype and then down to the practice squad. Whereas this year, he's remaining healthy and getting first team reps at guard. So Aaron Banks, Sean Rhyan, obviously locks there. Donovan Jennings, I see making the roster as a depth guard. I have John Williams on the practice squad because we really haven't seen him at all. He's been in the rehab group for OTAs and minicamp, and if he remains injured or doesn't get much hype around him, they 100% could drop him to the practice squad, and I doubt he gets claimed. There's only so many players that get claimed, and if he doesn't have a terrific camp, then nobody will claim him, and if he does have a terrific camp, then he'll make the roster. So I have John Williams right now, practice squad, same as Tyler Cooper, and I have them outright cutting JJ Lepe. Moving to center, this is the same exact orientation I had at last roster prediction, and this is how it's been all of OTAs and minicamp, with Elgton Jenkins not present in OTAs, and then also Elgton Jenkins during minicamp being part of the rehab group. Every single first team snap at center has gone to Jacob Monk. So I don't think there's any way, shape, or form he doesn't make the roster as a depth center in case Elgton Jenkins gets injured, or say someone else gets injured and they want to put Jenkins to guard and bring Monk in at center. Right now, he is center number 2. Now, Donovan Jennings, I believe, saw some snaps there. Kadeem Telfort, I think Sean Rhyan as well. But right now, it's definitely Jacob Monk at center number 2, and of course, Elgton Jenkins at center number 1, and I have them outright cutting Trey Hill. So that does it for the offense. That gives us 24 total players on the 53. Now, sliding over to the defense, starting with interior defensive line. I have them keeping 5. It's the same 5 as my first iteration prediction for this roster. Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, Warren Brinson, and Nazir Stackhouse, the undrafted free agent, I have making the roster. Now, we haven't heard much of Brinson or Stackhouse during minicamp and OTAs, but I still think they make the roster, right? I think when the pads come on, it's hard to really, see how well an offensive lineman or defensive lineman is doing without pads. It's really negligible. Like, you can't really tell. So training camp's going to be when we see this offensive line, defensive line take shape. But of course, we can still see who's taking snaps with the first team and project on that. But I do have Brinson, Stackhouse making the roster. A lot of people will say Colby Wooden should make the roster. But here's the thing. There's been a little bit of cross-training here as well, that they're trying to get him to play more nose tackle. And I think this is a move that's just not going to work. And it's kind of just the last hope of maybe he could do this to make the roster, but I just don't see it working. I mean, he's a very undersized lineman to try to play nose tackle when you compare him to someone like Nazir Stackhouse or even Warren Brinson. I mean, the size difference is just crazy. I know Wooden has put on some weight this offseason, but right now he's the odd man out. You have Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, even Kenny Clark that can all play 3-tech. You have Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse can play on the inside. Colby Wooden's kind of that guy. It's like, where do you put him? You don't really need him right now. And I have him practice squad, but he could be an outright cut. Another team just claims him, like the Patriots or something, that he could go there and maybe be a depth player there. I also have them practice squatting Cameron Young, who they signed a couple weeks ago, another guy that can play nose tackle. Again, they have a lot of options for nose tackle with Brinson, Stackhouse, Cameron Young. Whereas, Colby Wooden doesn't really fit for that for me, and it just seems like a last-ditch effort by him and the Packers to go, maybe you can make this roster as this type of player, but I just don't see it happening. And I have an outright cut for Nesta Jade Silvera, James Esther, and Keith Randolph. Moving to edge, this remains the same, except I dropped Aaron Mosby off from the practice squad, but the top 6, the 6 making the roster, I think is going to remain the same outside of injury for the entirety of offseason, unless they, for some reason, trade someone like J.J. Enagbare, which maybe, but I don't know. Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, J.J. Enagbare, Brenton Cox Jr., Barron Sorrell, and Colin Oliver, I have all making the roster, of course. I think every single one of those are locks. I think a surprise cut, maybe J.J. Enagbare, but I think they could actually get some trade value back from him, but I just don't foresee that happening. You can never have enough pass rushers. And I have them outright cutting Aaron Mosby and Deslin Alexander. Again, I had Mosby supposed to be on the practice squad last roster prediction, but we already have 6 making the roster. Do you really need a 7th on the practice squad? Moving over to linebacker, this remains exactly the same for me. Quay Walker, Edgerrin Cooper, Isaiah McDuffie, Tyron Hopper, and Isaiah Simmons. We've seen a lot of Simmons this offseason so far, taking a lot of first-team reps in the absence of Quay Walker. The top 3 linebackers have been Cooper, McDuffie, and Simmons in base, Hopper rotating in. So honestly, I'd say all 5 of these guys are roster locks, and I think right now it's very straightforward of who the 5 linebackers are going to be on this roster. Now, maybe someone like Jamon Johnson or Christian Welch could make a late push during training camp over someone like Isaiah Simmons. I just don't see it happening. Simmons talked about the fire that was lit underneath him for the lack of snaps he got on the Giants, and maybe the Packers strike gold with Isaiah Simmons, which would be awesome. I mean, just thinking of Quay Walker, Edgerrin Cooper, and Isaiah Simmons as the 3 linebackers in base, that might be the 3 most athletic linebackers in terms of collectively in the NFL in a base defense. But I have them practice squatting Jamon Johnson and Christian Welch. I think having both these guys on the practice squad, maybe game day call-ups for special teams reasons, and I like Jamon Johnson's potential. Moving to cornerback, I have them keeping 5, and that's going to be Keyshawn Nixon, Nate Hobbs, Carrington Valentine, Bo Melton, and Kamal Hadden. Back end of this, definitely lacking depth. That was something I talked about. I think the cornerback room overall from last year is upgraded if you consider Jair barely played anyways, and we were a good pass defense last year. You have great safeties behind you, which makes your job a lot easier. And, I think the issue was pass rush, right? If you can't get to the quarterback quick enough, you're not going to be able to cover long enough. So you got to get after the quarterback. But right now, I think the Packers, depth at the back end of the cornerback room, definitely lacking. But someone like Kamal Hadden, Bo Melton, these guys can step up, and Kamal Hadden already has been touted as playing very well or practicing very well in OTAs. That's what at least Keyshawn Nixon said, and maybe he's someone that steps up and becomes that 4th cornerback in the room. Now, Nixon, Hobbs, Valentine, all roster locks, of course, and you also have Javon Bullard, who plays nickel, but I have him listed as a safety, so you're essentially carrying, 6 cornerbacks have you on this roster because Bullard plays a lot of nickel, so can Hobbs. Valentine's an outside guy. Bo Melton, Kamal Hadden, both outside guys. And again, I do have Bo Melton making the roster as a cornerback. I think his course to this 53 is a lot higher chance at cornerback. And he's looked the part. He's been taking snaps at boundary cornerback. His footwork looks good. Obviously, some technique needs to be taught there, but he looks good out there and he's making some plays. Can't wait to see the pads come on and actually see what he can do at cornerback. And then I have a practice squad of Micah Robinson and Kalen King. So I actually have the Packers practice squadding both 7th round picks. Kalen King, it's a sight to be seen if he's going to take a step up here in year 2. Started out OTAs pretty rough and then injured his forearm and didn't participate in minicamp, but LaFleur did say he'll be ready for training camp, so we'll see then. And then I have them outright cutting Isaiah Dunn, Gregory Jr., and Tyron Herring. Now, the Packers could bring in a veteran. Do I think they need to bring in a veteran to be a starter? No, I don't think there's a veteran available right now that you would start over Nate Hobbs or Keyshawn Nixon. Personally, I don't see that as a plausible option. Then you're just taking snaps away from Carrington Valentine, which was the problem last year. Taking snaps away from him for Eric Stokes, which made no sense. And Valentine has good potential. Now, could they bring in a veteran that's been around the league that can be a depth guy, the 4th cornerback in this room for veteran minimum, just in case someone goes down? Yeah, 100% they could. And if that happens, maybe they drop Kamal Hadden or Bo Melton. But I don't think they need to bring in even, Rasul Douglas. I mean, you could watch the film last year. It wasn't pretty. James Bradbury, Stephon Gilmore. It just doesn't make much sense to me. Maybe if they went out and got a guy like Asante Samuel Jr., who has some years in the league, underwent, some injury issues this past season, really overlooked in free agency. Maybe you bring him in as a 4th guy in the case of injury for cheap. I'm fine with that. But right now, the top 3, that's as good as it's going to get outside of like a big trade that the Packers may make. So that's how I have it. Nixon, Hobbs, Valentine, Melton, and Hadden. Moving over to the last position on defense, safety. This remains pretty similar to my last iteration, at least the players making the 53 do. And that's Xavier McKinney, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, Katana Ladapo, Zane Anderson. And again, you can move Javon Bullard over to corner if you'd really like to. And I have Jonathan Baldwin making it as a practice squad player. He is listed as a cornerback, but he's been taking a lot of snaps at safety. The Packers guaranteed a lot of money to him. him. I wouldn't say a lot, but for an undrafted free agent, they did. And for that reason, I have him making the practice squad, and I have them outright cutting Omar Brown and Kazir Bugs Brown. As for special teams, this is going to remain the same the entire way through the offseason. Brandon McManus, Daniel Whelan, Matt Orzech. There's no competition at either of all of those. I mean, Alex Hale, but obviously not going to win that job over Brandon McManus, and he'll be the 54th player on the roster as an international player. It's always a good handcuff to have just in case if McManus ends up with a random injury during the week. Hey, you got a kicker ready. He's been in the building. He can go and kick for you that week. So that is my second iteration Green Bay Packers 53-man roster prediction post OTA, post mandatory minicamp. We have about 5 weeks until training camp, when I'm sure a lot of this will change in my next iteration. I may take this a step further and also make a video going over the predicted depth chart for the Green Bay Packers. Let me know down in the comments below if that's something you'd like to see. I'll go over specific positions such as, X receiver, Z, slot, same on defense, maybe the gadget player, something of that, and maybe make an entire depth chart based on this roster. Let me know if that's something you guys would like to see, but I really appreciate you coming by. If you could leave a like down below, it means a lot, supports the channel a ton. I'll catch you on the next one, and as always, go Pack Go.